Yeah,
Politicians.
there's also an element to the government where they're very bad at embracing innovation. So the way that inflation
Yeah.
is calculated, you take a survey of about 80,000 people and you ask them, what do you purchase? And then you need to make sure that that 80,000 person survey is actually a representative sample. In the US, for example, they only survey people in urban areas, so they're excluding all rural populations. And and then they try and get pricing data on that basket of goods that they derive. But using big data, there's so much data at our fingertips now in this increasingly digital world. I think we'll be able to provide a much more precise estimation of what that basket of goods is and how those prices in that basket are actually behaving. And part of the reason for this slow embrace of innovation is just how governments operate and the incentive for governments. And I'm talking about, the bureaucracy rather than the executive, rather than the politicians, the actual, um, the
Yeah.
mandarins, as they're called in Australia. They're incentivized to just make sure that nothing goes wrong. Because if something goes wrong, you're blamed
Yeah.
and you'll get hung out to dry. And no bureaucrat wants that. So the best way of ensuring that you're not blamed is by doing things in the exact same way that they've always been done, which is the complete opposite to innovation, which by definition is about finding newer and better ways of doing something. So we see this real slow embrace of any type of innovation. And as a result, we can find issues with things like inflation figures. Again, like the US is a huge country, you need to make sure that inflation captures all 50 states as well as all of their territories. And there's so much divergence within states. These are countries in and of themselves. And so to come up with an accurate metric really needs very, very precise data that I believe we can get from big data and advanced mathematical and statistical models, which I'm sure we can improve. In Australia, in about 2014 or 2015, the Bureau of Statistics was incredibly underfunded, and so the statistical software was just hanging together. It was kind of band-aided together, and they found out that there was a couple of coding errors that had meant that some of the unemployment data was not seasonally adjusted properly. And so when they found this out, they had to revise many years of data, and it was this huge debacle. And this is in a very developed country that we're seeing this type of thing. So
Yeah.
I'm sure that this is much more prevalent than many of us think. So this is why it's great to continually try and innovate to provide more precision.
I mean, that's what we're trying to do
Yeah.
with trueflation.com, and we've now really sort of tried to open source that as well. But rather than going into, the new technology that we're building, I want to sort of dig deeper into that topic, right? Where now, inflation is such an important part of any economy, and it impacts everything pretty significantly. Um, and if we look at inflation, I mean, what the way, at least in the US, they've publicly announced that in bringing inflation down to 2% is the primary objective, and pretty much at all costs, right? To the sacrifice again of the retail investor. So, they don't really mind about sacrificing the retail investor. But I think you've publicly stated that you're not sure that these interest rate hikes are going to solve the inflation problem. And I'd love maybe flesh that thinking out for us, and sort of share what your thinking is behind that, and why you
Yeah,
think that.
so to really flesh that out, we need to understand what's causing inflation in the US.
Yeah,
And the causes of inflation in the US are a little
yeah,
bit different to the causes of inflation in the EU. But one of the biggest causes of
yeah,
inflation in the US is from the fiscal response. So you had quantitative easing, where the US Treasury was issuing a lot of debt, and that debt was effectively being purchased by the Federal Reserve, who were printing money to purchase that debt. So all of a sudden, people have excess capital. They have more money in their pocket, which means that there's more demand for goods and services, which then bids the price of these goods and services up. You've also got what's known as a tight labor market. So you have much more demand for labor than supply. And we're in a situation right now where there's about
yeah,
1.7 job vacancies for one unemployed person. So that just means that the US economy and labor market is incredibly strong. And what happens when you have a very strong labor market is
Yeah.
that employees can bid up their wages. So they can say, hey, there's a shortage of us. We want more money. We want to be compensated. And
Yeah.
what effectively happens is firms pay them more and they pass on those costs to the consumers of the products that they manufacture or they provide, which then increases the price of these products, which is another cause of inflation. Um, so then those are what I call kind of demand side causes of inflation, but there are all these supply side causes of inflation, which are effectively created by external or exogenous factors. And this is the war in Ukraine, for example, which a lot of countries are responding by putting sanctions on Russia, particularly around their energy. So all of a sudden, Russian energy is taken out of the market, which causes a huge contraction in the supply of energy, of fuel and gas, which creates a surge in the price of fuel and gas. Then you have supply chain issues caused by Chinese lockdowns, for example, where lots of goods stuck in Chinese ports, for example. There's a shortage of ships going around, which again pushes the price of these products up. And in addition to that, you have upwards pressure on food that's caused by natural disasters, as well as the war in Ukraine, where that region is a huge producer of wheat. So all of a sudden, the supply of agriculture is diminished, again, pushing the prices up. So what happens when the Federal Reserve increases interest rates is that it stems demand, it reduces demand. And that can mean that and what they've said, and this is quite ambitious, is that they want to bring this ratio of job vacancies to unemployment down to a 1-to-1 level, down from 1.7 vacancies per unemployed person. And they think that they might be able to manage to do this without throwing the whole US economy into a recession. And it's probably wishful thinking. But the real problem here is that interest rates are affecting the demand side. And I've listed a number of supply side factors
Yep.
related to energy prices, food prices, consumer good prices, that interest rates are not really targeting. They're not addressing the root cause of these problems. And that's why I'm concerned that if the Federal Reserve is really serious about this 2% interest rate target, then they're not able to effectively deal with the root cause of the problem by just hiking interest rates. So what I'd love to see, and I'm sure something like this will occur, is the Fed says, okay, we're going to be more comfortable with a higher interest rate target, maybe 4% or 3%. Because don't get me wrong, inflation rather is terrible for the society because it affects everyone. It makes everyone much worse off.
Everyone.
Income is worth less. Savings are worth less.
It's like another tax, right? I mean, it's like another form of taxation.
Exactly. And a lot of economists are then debating, well,
Yeah.
inflation impacts everybody, whereas unemployment affects much less people. So does it make sense to aggressively target inflation with this collateral damage of unemployment? What is better for the society at large? So again, I'm concerned that interest rate hikes are not going to address the root cause of these supply side issues causing inflation, but they will address some of these demand side factors that I mentioned at the beginning. So I'm sure we'll see a decrease in inflation. I just don't think we'll get down to that 2% level.